Genesis chapter 4 tells the story of Cain and Abel, the sons of Adam and Eve, and introduces the themes of jealousy, sin, and consequence. Cain, the elder brother, is a farmer, while Abel is a shepherd. Cain's role as a farmer is significant. Farming was likely the most essential activity at the time, providing nearly all of humanity's food. However, it was not an easy task. God had cursed the ground after Adam's disobedience, making farming laborious. See Genesis chapter 3. But you might think Abel was a shepherd, so didn't they have meat to eat? In the Bible, humans were not yet allowed to eat meat. Instead, the animal should have been used for purposes like wool to make clothing, as seen in Genesis chapter 3. Humans were not allowed to eat meat until Genesis chapter 9, after the flood, in verses 3 and 4. This, of course, assumes that both Cain and Abel were following God's command at the time. Both bring offerings to God. Cain presents fruit from his crops, while Abel offers the best of his flock. God shows favor to Abel's offering, but not to Cain's, which makes Cain angry and jealous. The books in our Bible do not explain why God rejected Cain's offering. However, some books outside of the Bible provide possible suggestions. For example, the so-called Book of Jasher, a text claimed to have been rediscovered, suggests that Cain brought inferior fruit, while the first book of Adam and Eve speaks of what it describes as the first blood sacrifice. However, these texts are highly debated, as they contain inconsistencies with the canonical Bible. While the Bible and other ancient texts do not explicitly state how Cain and Abel learned to make sacrifices, it is reasonable to assume they received guidance, either directly from God or through Adam. Additionally, it is noted that while Jewish customs included both blood sacrifices and non-blood offerings, such as grain or incense, it is the blood sacrifice that is necessary for the redemption of sin. Grain offerings, often made with wheat, were acts of gratitude and devotion, symbolizing God's provision and the work of human hands. Incense offerings, on the other hand, represented prayers and worship, with the fragrant smoke symbolizing devotion rising to God. For Christians, the practice of blood sacrifice, and in fact any other sacrifice, was abolished after Jesus gave his life on the cross. He is considered the ultimate and final sacrifice, fulfilling the requirement for the redemption of sin once and for all. By paying the price of death while remaining sinless, Jesus redeemed all who would believe in him and follow his teachings, offering eternal salvation and a restored relationship with God. When Jesus gave his life on the cross, the gospel accounts in Matthew 27 verse 51, Mark 15 verse 38, and Luke 23 verse 45 tell us that the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. This curtain wasn't just a piece of fabric. It separated the holy place from the most holy place, where God's presence was believed to dwell. Only the high priest could enter this sacred space, and only once a year, to offer sacrifices for the sins of the people. The tearing of the curtain is deeply significant for Christians. It symbolizes the end of the separation between God and humanity. Through Jesus' ultimate sacrifice, the need for animal sacrifices was abolished, and all believers now have direct access to God. No longer confined to a sacred space, God's presence became accessible to everyone, everywhere. It is important to note that at this moment, Cain had not yet sinned, even though his offering was not accepted by God. In fact, God reaches out to Cain, offering both comfort and a warning. God tells him that if he does what is right, he will be accepted, but if not, sin is waiting like a predator, ready to capture and rule him. Instead, God urges Cain to take control and rule over sin before it consumes him. Genesis 4 verses 6 to 7 states, "Then the Lord said to Cain, 'Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it.' Despite God's warning, Cain allowed sin to take control of him instead of mastering it. Tragically, Cain bypassed lesser sins and went straight to one of the gravest, murder. He invites his brother Abel into the field and kills him. When God confronts Cain, asking where Abel is, Cain responds defiantly, 'I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper?' But God reveals he knows what Cain has done because Abel's blood was crying out to him. Because of his sin, Cain brought a curse upon himself, making his life one of hardship and wandering. Yet even in judgment, God shows mercy by placing a mark on Cain to protect him from being killed by others. This mark served as a sign of God's continued grace despite what he had done. Cain eventually settles in the land of Nod, east of Eden, and his descendants become builders of cities, musicians, metalworkers, and herders. But sin would continue in his bloodline, and they would all eventually be wiped out by the flood. The chapter closes by introducing Adam and Eve's third son, Seth, through whom righteous men would once again re-enter the earth.